Jordyn, I feel like I'm used to saying like welcome back to episode 18, but like we need a fresh start. Life is crazy and I don't even know what the last few months have been. So I'm so excited to finally see your face. I'm so excited to be back doing this podcast and exploring what the heck our lives are.
Oh my God, it's been too long, Sam. I have missed you. I have missed this podcast. Season 2, episode 1, fresh start, the bigger life.
Exactly. I mean, I was just saying to you off the air, I don't know if I've truly processed that like I'm not in college anymore. I still feel like I'm on like a weird summer break and going back to Iowa. So like that I am past that chapter of my life feels very weird, but also like me wearing an Iowa jersey truly feels about 3 years ago compared to like everything that's happened in life. So it's a very, I don't even know how I'm feeling right now. I don't know that I've processed anything in the last couple months, but I can't wait to fill y'all in on everything.
I mean, I have so many questions. Like your life has been so insane. There's so many things that I don't even know. That when I'm behind the scenes, so I'm excited to dive into it. But life is crazy after college anyways, much less your journey. I mean, there's so much. Last time we talked, I had to listen back to last episode because I couldn't remember where we left off. You were not married yet. You were talking about your honeymoon, and you had just announced that you were going to enter the NWSL draft.
Is it bad that like getting married 3 months ago literally feels like one of the least important things in my life? Like, love my husband, he's great. Husband, that's still not normal. I haven't gotten used to the new last name. Like, it's about 50-50 when I'm using it, when I'm not. I don't really even know when I'm using it, when I'm not. So it's just, I go by both. I don't really understand. Yeah, my wedding day was perfect and amazing. And I could talk about that for about 8 hours, but I don't think that's why anyone is actually listening to this podcast. But yeah, I'm married. I went on a honeymoon and then so much life happened. And you're in the middle of spring season. How is spring going? How is that transition? How's everything going down in Michigan?
Yeah. I mean, spring season is just like a whole nother beast. It really is. It's a whole different reality from in the fall, because in the fall, you're training for something very, very specific. You have games every Thursday and Sunday. Your schedule is based solely around that. Where in spring, you're kind of training for a good portion of it just to get better. You don't have games that you're practicing around. You have, scouting and all of that stuff. None of that's happening in the spring. It's just solely like individual improvement. And then once you get into kind of second half of spring season, you start working on that team aspects and you have these spring games. We are 3 games in now. We just played Notre Dame for like a spring cup tournament we're in. Gives you a little something to play for. It's like a 3-game tournament. We tied 1-1 and then won in PK. So that's kind of where we're leaving off in our spring season. Unfortunately, I did tear my PCL, so I will be out for the rest of spring season, but it's non-surgical, quick recovery process here. It's like 3 weeks in a lockout brace, so I'm desperately looking forward to the next time I can bend my knee. That's going to be the highlight of my weeks, as we go forward here. And then it's like 6 weeks of rehab and recovery and return to play from there. So nothing too crazy, but
Yeah, obviously a bad scenario, but I feel like the lesser of very many evils that it could have been at least.
correct. Surgery would have been a whole nother beast. So I'm happy that it's something not minor, but in comparison.
So like how are we hobbling around campus? Like are we just kind of like limping around or like do we got like a fancy like scooter? What's going on? That's the real question is how are we getting from class to class?
Yeah, so I have the best roommates in the entire world. So incredibly thankful and grateful to them. Shout out to everyone in my apartment here because they've really had to like help me out. It's crazy because we're off campus. It's like walkable, but in a lockout brace, not really. It'd take me like forever to get anywhere. So it's crazy how like independent I was and now how codependent I have to be to get anywhere. Like every single appointment I have, every single class I have, I'm like, guys, anyone want to take me? And I scheduled a bunch of things. Like I had dermatology appointments. They have to go like drive me to, pick me up from, like not even class or soccer related. It's just life. That they have to take over for me. So they've been absolutely amazing. I did get a fancy handicap pass, so I have that for 3 months. So we are milking that. One of the many perks of tearing your PCL, guys. And then I mean, once I'm on campus though, it's a howl. I
Yeah.
constantly get the timing wrong of when I need to be places. I'm like, it's like a 15-minute walk. I'm like, no, it's just like a 35-minute walk now because I am slow, so slow.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, when Jordyn and I were trying to figure out what episode one should look like, how this all should go, we kind of just decided on some life updates. As y'all know, specifically for me, my life has been very crazy. And I'm very, very excited to explain so much more. Jordyn and I really haven't talked about my life off air. And so this will be her learning everything and her kind of firing questions and going through the journey of the last couple months in my eyes. And yeah, looking forward to the future and wanted to let everyone in on my crazy journey and basically where I'm at in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get into it, I just remembered, I don't think I ever told you, but my assistant coach, Gabe Romo, he was at your hotel when you were on your honeymoon for his bachelor party, and he goes, "Is Sam Carey here?" I was like, "Yeah, she's there for her honeymoon." He goes, "Oh my God, I just saw her."
No,
I like woke up and I'm like, he's asking.
you should have
Afterwards, I was
said
like,
hi. What the heck?
he's like, I like, you don't really know assistant coaches. And he's like, she's doing her thing, like I'm doing mine. It was just like the craziest story. I was like, there's no way you're at the same hotel right now as Sam. He's like, he should have gone up to you and been like, hey, like, are you the girl from like the Big Life podcast? I'm such a huge fan.
That is absolutely incredible. Okay, so anything that he saw down in Cancun, he didn't see. That's simple. Oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah, I just had to tell you as we get started here because I mean, what a coincidence.
Incredible, incredible.
So you had the honeymoon, right? And then shortly after you had declared you're entering the NWSL draft, you are down at where they're hosting the draft, but not for the draft. Can you kind of explain that?
Yeah, so the process leading up to draft day is a very interesting process and one that looks very, very different for every single player. So actually the first text I got from an NWSL coach came to me on my honeymoon. I was like, I am not reading this right. What's going on? And it was a text from Washington Spirit basically being like, yeah, like we'd love to set up a phone call with you. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like? What's going on? So it's something that happens before the draft is, for some people, like I said, there's plenty of girls that get drafted and have no idea and have no contact with coaches. And then there's other people that have a ton of contact and don't get drafted. Um, so I had phone calls with both Washington Spirit and Portland Thorns leading up to draft. And we really had no idea. Like I knew that if I was going to get drafted, it would be later. I was fully, aware of that based on conversations I had, based on like my own reality in a lot of ways. But I also like knew it wasn't out of the realm of possibilities. So our lovely boss, Jen Gruskoff, kept asking me, they're like, so are you coming to California? Are you going to be there for the draft? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, I have no idea. Like, so much of me was like, I don't want to be at the draft. I would much rather be in my living room with my family and my emotional support. And then I was like, it's also once in a lifetime. Like, you know what? Whatever. So I went back and forth. But for those who don't know, the NWSL draft is also hosted at the United Soccer Coaches Convention, which was in Anaheim, California this year. And Girls Soccer Network always is there. And we actually, the past 2 years, have done presentations about social media and soccer at the convention. So both myself and Jen Greskoff talk for people's eyes off for an hour and whatever about stuff we're passionate about, and they pretend to care and listen, basically. So I was planning on going out there for that. And then on top of it, the All-American banquet was like the day after the draft. And becoming a Scholar American, All-American for Iowa and being Iowa's first ever Scholar All-American, I was like, okay, like I could be there for that too. And then I'm like, well, now there's 2 out of 3 reasons why I guess I would go to Anaheim. I guess I go for all 3. So I flew out the Wednesday before the draft that was on Friday to start working and be there with Girls Soccer Network fully representing them. And then on Friday, my family flew out. I'm pretty sure it took my husband 4 different planes and a lot of travel due to snow and flight cancellations and a bunch of stuff. So I like didn't even think he was going to make the draft. To be there with me on draft night and yeah, lead up to that crazy weekend.
Okay, so I guess we'll get into the draft night, but going backwards a little bit here, because we never really talked about it. So you're talking to these different coaches and stuff. What does that process kind of look like as you enter the draft? What do you need to do? Are you getting agents? Are you like, how do you navigate that? Are you just trusting your coaching staff pretty much?
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's once again, it's one of those things that's so individualized. And I think it depends on a lot of person's like situation. Like there are some people, let's be real here, that enter the draft and know they're going to get drafted. It's just a matter of when and where. There's other people that are going to be in the middle. And then there's other people that it might be more of like a longer shot for them. And me knowing I was one of those people kind of in the middle, it was an interesting process to kind of navigate. And, I'm thankful I can use my platform and say all this now because I had no idea what I was doing the entire time. I had never really had someone that entered their name in the draft that I could talk to about any of this. And so, like, I was completely flying blind. So I hired my agent right before my wedding. And for me, I decided on him just based on someone that I knew would genuinely have my back. I really felt like he was someone that would look out for my best interest and I could trust in a lot of manners. And that was a really, really great decision for me. Other girls go into the draft without an agent at all. It's all kind of dependent on what you feel is best for you. I will say I'm very, very thankful I had an agent and I am very confident that he did a lot for me. So when you put your name in the draft, it's like a lot of work, but also not a lot of work. It's very hard to say. Like it's literally like it's a form, basically a Google form that's like, all right, here's my contact information. Here's my agent's contact information if you need it. Here's where I played college. And then it's like a list of like your top 5 accolades. And then like a link to a highlight video, a link to a resume that you build, like basically like a CV about your playing career. And that's it. And so it's like very light, honestly. Like I feel like I was like, oh, there's so much more I wish I could say on this draft application. Then again, you have to know, like, because of platforms like Y Scout and other things, like your highlight reel honestly isn't as important because a coach is going to go up to Y Scout. Like anyone's going to look good on their highlight reel. The real truth is going to come out on platforms like Y Scout where they can actually look you up. And so for me, that wasn't like as important. I had a highlight reel. My agent made it for me. My coaches, college coaches helped. But yeah, so it's just like different things like that. A lot of it from then on, once you put your name in the draft, comes from people helping you out. So, like I said, I did have my agent. I also had Dave Diani making a lot of phone calls for me. And so I'm super, super thankful for my guy, Dave. And just kind of talking to other coaches, saying, hey, here's Sam. She's really interested. This is why I think she's good, all these different things. The other thing I know I kind of think I teased last season is people from other schools get phone calls about you. Like, I know for a fact, like my guy, Jeff Hostler, got phone calls where he was like kind of having to say information about me as someone who has played against me. Am I good enough to be at this level? What does this mean? All this stuff. A lot of it, I do believe agents are very, very helpful. But at the end of the day, I think the coaching world is so small. The soccer world is so small that having like those relationships and your college coach really, really does help because I think their word can go a lot further than an agent that they've never met. An agent's a salesperson. It's great to have them almost constantly bugging coaches and having their name at the forefront of coaches' minds. But are you going to go to an agent to really trust why someone's good or someone who's coached them for 5 years? You're going to go to the coach. And so Dave and other coaches in the Big Ten having my back and like being able to vouch for me about the player and the person I am was honestly, I think, a really big deciding factor. Going back to like, am I going to get drafted? What am I going to do? There were so many decisions that were happening, the weeks and days before. I remember another option I had on the table was there's the new USL Super League that's starting in August. And I had a contract offer extended to me for a team in the Super League, but it was on the condition that I signed at noon the day of the draft, therefore revoking my name from the draft. And so I had a decision to make that I weighed really, really heavily of, is it worth me taking this risk in the NWSL draft, knowing I may not get drafted, losing all form of safety, or like have something to like kind of feel safe about, but in the like USL, what is the better option here? And I weighed with that one heavily. I think for me, the ultimate reason why I chose the NWSL draft is just I want to know if I could do it. And frankly, the NWSL has always been the priority for me. It's always been the dream. And I'd always dreamed of potentially hearing my name called. And I think that if I would have pulled it, I would have rather, my name not been called, but at least I tried. I've always said, like, living by this quote of like, throw yourself in the arena. And if you fail, is it really a failure? And I wrestled with it for a very long time. And then I was like, no, like if I didn't try, I will always have that what if. Like, what if I could have gotten my name called? What if this would have happened? And so now I don't have any of that because I threw my name in. And I'm really, really thankful for that decision. It definitely was the best decision for me at the time, but it was a tough one to make and trying to figure out what was my best option going into that point then. So yeah, that was leading up to draft day. And then the whole thing, of course, on top of that is I'm getting texted by my agent, oh, talk to Portland today, talk to Chicago today. Like, I think the night before the draft, my Dave texted, like, Chicago just called me, they're interested, so and so. Like, my agent was also at the convention that I was at. I would like walk past him in the hallways as I knew he was having conversations with me with NWSL coaches about me. And so like the whole thing was just this crazy like phenomenon of like trying to figure out like if a coach is seriously looking at you or not. And this is where it got really mentally and emotionally taxing, is like we had one team blatantly say like, no, we're not interested. Totally fine. Honestly, I respected so much for them because they like gave me an answer.
Yeah.
Every other coach was basically like, oh, she's in the mix. And like me and my agent just kind of had this running joke of, okay, like how big is this mixing bowl we're talking about? Like, is it this big? Is it like this? Like, what's the mixing bowl? Like, what does that mean? And so like so much of it was like we literally had no idea about like if I would hear it or if I not. The one thing like I will say I'm super thankful for, and I believe that got transmade well, is a lot of coaches were talking about my character. There was a lot of discussion about who I am as a person and what I can bring to a team culture. And for that to get conveyed and to get backed by so many people, that was one of the factors that were very much leaning for me getting drafted, was who I have been in the media with my platform and different things like that. And so that was very encouraging, and also like interesting that that matters too, as much as, being on the field, you always hear it does, but it was definitely one of my bigger selling points and why I probably ended up in the position I did.
Yeah, that's like one of my favorite quotes ever, is that talent puts you in rooms only character can keep you in. And it makes the biggest difference on a team. We've seen it throughout college, and it makes complete sense to me that it'd be so important to an NWSL roster. Bringing in these new players, you want to make sure they're not only providing on the field, but off the field as well. So I have a few questions as you go through that. So when you find an agent, what is the incentive for them? Is it like an upfront fee that you then pay them, or is it like conditional on you getting signed somewhere, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so obviously it may be different depending on the agency. And so the agency that I decided to go with, I have joked for the longest time that I owe this man so much money that he never got out of me. Um my contract with my agent is he gets paid a percentage of my contract by the club. So it doesn't even come out of my money, it comes out of the club that basically he negotiates the contract with. So for me, I signed my first professional contract on March 1st. I hired this man in December. And so he did all of the draft process and all of my time in the NWSL for free. And so like I'm so so thankful, and I would not simply be here without him, and so it's really really crazy. But yeah, it's a very interesting way that it works.
Yeah, that is interesting, especially when you're weighing whether or not to get an agent, because I know some girls don't. So if it's a percentage of contract and you know you're for sure getting drafted for some of those top players, I wonder if they forfeit kind of the agent just
Exactly.
for financial aspects.
Mhm.
Does he then represent any other players entering the draft?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he had 5 girls that decided to enter in the draft, or he had a couple girls that were out of college that he was doing the same process with that he was with me, with them, and a couple other like teams had told them no. So for them, he was able to kind of push overseas options and other options in different areas because he knew that the NWSL was off the table. So to my understanding, there was about 3 of his clients that he thought had a chance of getting drafted, and I believe I was the only one of his client that did.
Oh, nice. Is it a concern ever that he's going to push other players then, like ahead of
Yeah.
you if you're
And so that's definitely like one of the things I would look for in an agent, and I did. And I would always recommend to anyone like now moving to this part is who are their clients and what positions do they fly, different things like that. Like you don't want to go and work for, an agent that has like 6 goalies, because who's he going to push first? Who's he going to. So me, I was his only at the time left-footed left back. And then I believe he actually signed another left-footed left back, but she went directly overseas. So it really wasn't competition because he wasn't pushing both of us. And so it's definitely a factor to look into of like, who do they represent? And then for me too, like I understand that I graduated from the University of Iowa, like I understand that I wasn't a first flashy round draft pick. Like I don't want to work for an agency where I am just another number because I don't have all these top accolades and all these top, representation that other people did. So for me, it was a decision to go to a smaller agency where I could be almost a bigger fish in the pond, where I knew that the time would be given to me to find my right fit versus just like, oh yeah, she's here too, but we have all these other more important people.
Yeah, yeah, that's super interesting. It's something like I've never really thought about as you go through this process until you spoke about it. I'm like, I wonder how that works.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Um, yeah. So as you go ahead and you go through this process and these coaches are reaching out to your agent and other coaching staff, and I know like behind the scenes in our office, it was crazy how much information they actually get and ask for. Like they were getting all of our like catapult data, which for anyone who doesn't know are little tracking devices we wear and our sports bras for games and practices to see like your heart rate, your max velocity, your speed, your player load, essentially to see if you'll compare to other players and things of that nature. Which I thought was really, really interesting too. Just it never occurred to me that they'd want that data. How many coaches did you or schools or teams? Sorry, I'm still in college
Well,
life.
we're in college.
Yeah, I'm like, how many teams did you personally talk to?
Yeah, personally, I talked to three. So I went to Louisville's Pro Day, which I believe we talked about in season 1 of the pod, but that was in November. They invited a couple college, players down to essentially try out. Um, and that was a 3-day almost ID camp with Louisville. And I had zero contact with them after that. And then I had the phone call with Portland Thorns and the phone call with Washington Spirit. And those are the only coaches that I personally had any contact with.
Yeah, wow. So then, okay, now you're at the convention. You've decided that you're going to stay for the NWSL draft, right? What are those emotions and feelings as you go through this?
I don't think I stopped walking on the day of the draft. My mom was there, and I swear we walked so many laps around the Anaheim Convention Center. It was insane. Like for the people that were like work for GSN that were there, I don't think I sat still. I don't think I could like tell you a single thing on my brain. I was trying not to panic, but like I also had an eerie sense of calm. And I don't know if that was like a confidence that it was going to be my name called or a confidence that no matter what happened, it would be okay. Um, but it was a very, very interesting, just like it was such a big day. And I think my life, like I knew it and people around me knew it. There's a ton of referees that go to the United Soccer Coaches Convention because there's a whole referee section. So people are coming up to me, hugging me. There's coaches that I play against that know me. I think the UCLA coach, the Cincinnati coach that like I've had interactions with are like coming up to me and hugging me and wishing me luck and all these things. And so it's like it's such an amazing sense of community, but I'm also like, please don't talk about it. I'm trying not to cry. I'm trying not to have a panic attack. I don't know what's gonna happen. And so it's like it's a weird balance. And like I honestly, as much as I'm like, oh yeah, like this was 2 months ago, I don't know if I even remember it. It was a whirlwind of a day.
How big is the convention? Like, how many people are there?
And massive. The United Soccer Coaches Convention is probably a gathering around over 1,000 soccer coaches across the country and across the world, plus soccer vendors and different like exhibitionists and referees. And so it's this giant community. So it was so fun to be around so many people. And then you add the draft. So you're seeing like I walked past the Louisville assistant coach that day. I walked past the Chicago assistant coach that day. And like I'm trying to not make eye contact, but I'm also like, hi, I'm here. One coach came up to me and was like, good luck today. And I'm like, you have the control in that. So it's like just a very weird thing to balance, like that feeling of like, oh yeah, I'm super confident and I'm trying not to cry.
I mean, I can't even imagine like the emotions and feelings as you're like doing this all in person too. So as you go through and you start to hear these names called and you're getting towards the end of the draft, do you know like what are the feelings there as you start to near the end?
Yeah. So I knew my name was going to be called in the first or second round. Like I said, I'm pretty realistic in that sense. It's fine, cool. So I wasn't even really paying attention. I was kind of just like in the back joking with my mom, whatever. Like I was really calm and collected then. Then round 3 started coming along, and I'm like, okay, I feel like this could be a possibility. And just like where our intel was leaning, where our gut was leaning with like all the conversations we had had and a couple like run-ins that we had literally had that day, it looked like I was going to be Chicago's 4th-round draft pick. That's what we were pretty much like, yeah, I feel pretty confident that I'll be Chicago's 4th-round draft pick. Cool, great. So every time like Chicago came up, I was like, okay, not me this time. That's fine. Not me this time. That's fine. And so like that in like that whatever feeling that I was gonna get that fourth round draft pick from Chicago was like keeping me sane the entire time. So pick 45 comes, Chicago's fourth round draft pick. My agent like pulls out his camera. He's like ready to record. We're like, guys, this is it. And then Celia Gaynor gets drafted. So like, where's my, I'm like, Michigan State? Really? I'm like, oh God, okay. Keep cool. And then like low key, like Celia Gaynor, Sam Carey. Like I was like, oh, okay. So what do we do now? And like my heart sunk in that moment. Like I was like, I'm not getting drafted. Like my family went silent. Like we had no idea what to do. I really like, I was like, okay, keep your stuff together, keep it together, Sam. Like you're fine. And then I think like 30 seconds of awkward silence of me and my family at this table, like not knowing what to do, how to act. Like my agent was next to us and he just kind of starts smiling. And we were like, what are you doing? And he was like, you're Louisville's next draft pick. Like, you're going to get the pick from Louisville. And I swear to God, my mom looked at him and was like, if you're messing with me right now, like, I thought the man was dead. I thought Kimberly was launching across the table, like, ready to choke this man. And he was like, I just got a text from the Louisville coach. Like, they're going to pick you. And like, I don't know that I truly believed it until it happened. And I'm like still in that moment. But yeah, 48th pick comes. My agent pulls out his camera again. Like my family's just sitting there and we're like, I don't know what's happening. And Louisville drafts me and I hear my name. And I think I lost all feeling in my body at that moment and just being there with my family to celebrate. The funniest thing is my family were not the loudest people in the room. And if you ever like watch back the video of me getting drafted, you hear this shriek. Everyone thought it was my mom. They're like, oh my God, Kim Carey went crazy. No, I'm sorry, I'm outing you. Jen Greskoff, loudest person in the room, the Girls Soccer Network media team. I love y'all to death so much. I felt the support. Goes crazy. The media section's over on the other side, and they're like quiet the whole time. They started just going nuts. It was such a cool moment to be there and be there with them and all these people that have given me so much love and support and to hear my name, the first Iowa Hawkeye drafted. I believe that was then like the 100th school that had gotten drafted was Iowa getting drafted into the NWSL and having that moment and being there with my family. Like I honestly can't speak about how incredible it was.
Oh my God. I mean, I can't even like, I'm getting like a little teary-eyed just like hearing you tell this story. It's amazing. If you had to go back in time, would you have wanted the prep from your agent or would you wanted to be surprised?
I think like looking back, like it's kind of like a fun little hee surprise, but I don't know that I've still like my heart and my like acid reflux has recovered from that night. So like I would have loved to at least known I was getting picked, because I was fully like convinced that I was done and there was no shot, and I was like having to pivot to plan B. And so it was definitely yeah, no words.
So you get drafted, then what? What does the rest of the night look like for you?
Oh God. The rest of the night I think is probably not your traditional like what everyone else did. I think my family, we were all just so like emotionally worn and like it had finally happened. And like they had been there with me, the decisions of like, do I even keep my name in the draft? Do I go overseas? Do I have to go to the USL? Like, what are we doing? And so we took a bunch of photos, you know, the media, I did all the media with the NWSL. Family took a bunch of photos. We looked at each other and said, dang, we're hungry. We went to the Denny's across the street in Anaheim, ordered hot chocolate and grilled cheese, and sat there for hours as my phone was just blowing up. I like just put my phone in my purse. I was like, I can't be around it right now. And I just spent an hour with my family drinking hot chocolate and grilled cheese at a Denny's across the street before falling asleep.
I do think you're right, that that is an incredibly unique experience. I do not think many other draftees went and did that that night. Interesting choice of location, I will say.
Full
Did you,
move, after party, you know.
yeah. Once you get drafted, did you go and like were the other draftees there from the night for Louisville? Did you go and like meet with them at all?
Yeah, so out of the four draftees from Louisville, three of us were present. So Raylan Turner was the first round draft pick. Emma Sears was not present, and she was the second round draft pick. And then me and Madison White were both the fourth round draft picks for Louisville. So by the time I got drafted, because the draft is long. Like, I don't know if any of y'all follow along in the draft. It's long. So Raylan Turner had already left. She was number 6 pick. She was out. She wasn't waiting for number 48. So she left. And I actually briefly had met Madison White at the Louisville Pro Day in November when I went. And she played at Texas Tech. We had a coach leave Iowa after 4 years to go to Texas Tech. So same coach situation. And so when she got drafted, I was able to give her a quick hug and stuff like that. So I met her briefly, but yeah, it was mostly a time to be with family and celebrate and know that I had basically a week to get my life together and move down to Louisville.
Is that what the turnaround is?
Yeah, so I got drafted on January 12th and I officially like drove down to Louisville. And luckily for me, it wasn't hard because St. Louis is only 4 hours from Louisville. So it was a really good location for me to get drafted to. And I moved in January 19th to my apartment to start training that Monday. So it's a really, really quick turnaround from draft day to be ready to go and like in an NWSL environment.
So you get to Louisville, you have like a week, 10 days to pack your stuff up, you drive down there. What does that look like in terms of getting there? Do they provide housing and transportation and all that stuff?
Yeah, so one of the like biggest things I think I want to say like that I don't know that everyone fully understands is I got drafted, but I did not make the team. So that's like I feel like one of the biggest nuances. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, congrats! Like you're in the NWSL." Like, no. And I was well aware of this. Like I still had to try out. Getting drafted was simply like getting my name at preseason camp. And so it was awesome and I'm super excited for it, but there was still a lot of steps to go in this process. So I got down to Louisville. They did provide housing. So I moved into an apartment down there. Had a roommate who was going like she was not a draftee. She was on the team already. So she was great. Loved Alexa. Um, but yeah, I still knew I had this like long road of like I was kind of on the team, but not. I was in this weird halfway position of like, yeah, I got drafted, but I still hadn't earned a contract, and no one had. We all had to go and basically make this 26-man roster that we knew was coming. So for me, like obviously it was so exciting, and I was so, I mean, amazed to be there. There was also still a lot of steps left to go in this process, and I knew that too.
Yeah. So you get there, you move into your apartment. Does Trey come with you?
Trey, it was actually really interesting. I had a really lucky situation with Louisville in the way of like, I think the world fully worked out for me to be there because I have a house in my family that isn't really used anymore. Like someone like doesn't live there, but they still have the house in New Albany, Indiana, which is 15 minutes away from Louisville. So for it was a crazy weird situation, but Trey was able to eventually kind of move down, kind of live half what time in New Albany and kind of we were like playing like I was joking that I was playing like divorced parent, like spend a night at my apartment, go over to Trey's. So it was a weird situation. We were married, but we didn't live together in a bunch of ways. But yeah, it was nice to be able to have him around on most days and help me through this process.
Yeah, yeah. So what does day one look like?
Yeah, day one is mostly it was a bunch of like, your same stuff you did in college, like medical tests, doctor's visits, blood work, all those different things, and then team meetings. And I think like it didn't hit me till then when I walk in the room and I see Jalen Howell and Savannah DeMello and all of these incredible players that I've looked up to for so long. I'm sitting next to me. And I'm like, oh, I'm here. Like I am competing at this level with people who played in the World Cup, in the Olympics, have all these things. And I'm like, who the heck am I to be here? So I think that was like the first like shell shock of like, oh, this is the next step. Like I'm not in Iowa. I'm not in college anymore.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. So you go and you get all these tests done, and then kind of just walk us through, I guess, that first week.
Yeah. So then you kind of slowly started transitioning to the field. So fitness tests. So I've now run multiple fitness tests, I guess. But yeah, fitness test was day 2. Did really, really well in that. I actually finished second place in the team at that time.
What
Um,
fitness tests do they run?
yeah, so they run a 1K. It's a very interesting fitness test. So it's literally a 1 kilometer. So down and back on the field 5 times. And the goal is to get it under 4 minutes. And then for like game ready fitness, get it in 3:30. So yeah, rookie Emma Sears did really, really well in the fitness test and won. And then I came in right behind her at like 3:30.
Look at you.
Starting off day 2 strong.
Yeah. So that's really interesting that I mean, how different all the fitness tests are. What's your favorite so far? What do you think's most game realistic, actually?
Okay, this is
Besides
a
that.
hot topic, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot like recently. So we'll transition more into my life later, but I think the one I've run most recently is my new favorite fitness test of actually being a decider of fitness. But we'll get there.
Okay, okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, the first couple of weeks are like training. So it's training every day, sometimes 2 a days, sometimes lifts, different things like that. And basically for me at this point, like I knew I wasn't fully on the team. I was trying to earn my spot with every way I could. And that wasn't even on the field always. Like for me, I have it in my nature. Like I will be the first one to show up to the facility. So I was one of the first ones in the locker room every single day. I'm gonna be the one to help pick up cones and do all the things. Like I was just trying so hard to do the little things right and do anything I could to like help myself stand up and help myself earn that contract. And so, I mean, from then on, literally everything you do is getting evaluated and everything on and off the field is. And it's just like anything at the forefront of my mind was how do I get this contract?
Yeah. So how long are you in Louisville for?
Yeah, so Louisville owns my rights as a draftee in the NWSL from the moment I'm drafted through March 13th. So like March 13th was this magical day in my brain that was like, okay, this is where I'm going to find it out. So for us in Louisville, we had you have your 26-man roster is the ultimate thing that you're coming down to. And so we had about, I think at our highest point, 31 in camp. And so there's multiple people you knew were going to get cut in like there was some NRIs, which is a non-rostered invitee. So that's basically like you didn't get drafted, but you can either invite like college players or just other pros who aren't currently on contract to your preseason. So you're fighting with all of them. Everyone there is on the same level. And then you have your people on contracts, but also contracts can get waived and there's different things. There's so many things that can happen that like it's hard to even like do the math. I will say like that's probably where I struggle most is like every day I was like still trying to do the math of like, okay, if this girl gets cut or if this girl gets injured or if this happens, like this is how I get this. And you're looking around like for us, there's like 7 defenders. I was number 8. So I'm like, 8's a good number to have for a back line. Like you want to have 2 shifts, like trying to figure out like what all the answer was going to be. And so it was a very emotionally taxing weeks. Yeah, I was in Louisville from January 19th through March 1st of like trying to figure out, am I going to make this roster? What do I need to do? Am I good enough? How can I be better? Watching film, watching all these things, growing as a player, but also you still have to play really good while you're trying not to panic about the fact that like I could get cut tomorrow and not have anywhere to live and I'm making no money. So like, how am I supporting myself? So like those weeks, I'm so grateful for my experience in Louisville. I became a better soccer player. I was pushed by players incredible levels. I was on the field with people who have competed at the highest levels. I have coaches who supported me, who wanted me to get better. I'm so grateful. However, being in that position is one of the hardest positions I've ever been in my life, if not the hardest month and a half of my life.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine just the mental strength and fortitude you have to go through every day and be like, I'm still gonna compete for it, not knowing what it's gonna bring. Like,
Yeah,
uh,
it's a lot of just like the constant, like, I got to a point where it's like, if I had a really good practice, I'd be like, I never want to practice again. Like, that's going to be the final thought they have on me. Or like, if I had, like, there's plenty of days I had bad practices and like, I would call my mom and be like, Mom, I suck. I don't deserve to be here. What's going on? It's, it was a huge, massive toll. Like, even, I don't think I talked to my friends for like 2 months. I was terrible to Trey. Like, I'll fully say it. Like, I felt like I was a terrible wife to Trey because like I couldn't even focus on those aspects of my life because everything in my mind was just soccer. How do I do this? What am I doing? How can I get here? Am I doing what enough? Am I good enough? And so like it was exhausting.
I believe it. So how, because they make cuts throughout the season as you go.
Mhm.
How far did you make it in this process, and what was it like seeing kind of all those other people you started with a 33 man leave throughout this?
Yeah, this is where it gets really hard. And you get the text that so and so is no longer with the club and you kind of smile. Like it sounds awful to say, but like I feel bad for that person, but one less, all right, I made it one step further. And so like there was kind of things like week by week that I just had to have a cherry. Like we did a week long preseason trip in Arizona. And okay, I made the roster to Arizona. Great, cool. Play well in Arizona. Let's see how that goes. And so it's like, for me, it was just kind of like finding those cherry pick moments of like taking it week by week, day by day. And, you know, one of the best advices, I remember going around to a couple girls my first day, and I was like, what's your biggest advice as someone entering this process? And I'll never forget it. Ellie Jean, who's had a very, very amazing pro career so far, and someone I've known well because she was a senior at Penn State when I was a freshman at Iowa. So I played against her. Told me, she's like, the first thing you got to do is put your blinders on. Like, it is your journey. It is, you know, everyone's journey is different. Everything's happening to different people. Like, you can celebrate other people, of course you want to, but like your blinders are on. And I took that to heart, and I truly think that's one of the most important things you can do at this level is like, you just got to focus on you. And it's exhausting and terrifying, but also it's all you get to kind of sink or swim in a lot of scenarios. So for me, when you see like girls starting to get cut and you're like, okay, like I made it one step further, what does this mean? I think the hardest thing, and listen, this could be different at any club. I'm only speaking from my experience, is I didn't feel like I had a ton of communication where like, oh yeah, like this is something we're considering, or this is where we're at with you, or this is our decision. Like I was taking no news as good news, and I just kind of was rolling with it. And so for me, I was just like, okay, like I guess we're still going. And that's just kind of the mentality that we were staying in.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest differences, I think, going into a team culture from college. You have all these girls coming in and you have big draft classes or small, depending on just the year, but everyone there is signed, right? Like you sign your contract, they're all there, they're all coming in the first couple weeks are a get to know you game. Is it the same at that level, or is it like kind of the veterans are just like waiting to see who makes it through before you actually put that type of effort into knowing those players?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, and it depends on where you're at and the people you're around. I would bluntly say I think I experienced a bit of both. I had people like I still talk to this day that I, am so grateful for their veteranship and their leadership and allowing me to pick their brains and their support. And I also have people that I feel like I never talked to because I wasn't on the team. So why waste the time on talking to me until I established myself like that? And I can't really blame them either way, because in that setting, like I'm sure there's so many people that come in and out of the door. Like there's no time. And once again, if you have your blinders on, it's just your journey and you're focused on it and you're not really worried about other people's journeys. So yeah, it's a little bit of both. I've definitely experienced a bit of both in that.
Yeah. So you're going through this process. Obviously, you are not in Louisville right now.
Surprise, I'm not in Louisville.
So, what does that transition look like? How do you know that you're going to have to take other steps? Is this a decision you make or the coaching staff makes? Kind of walk us through this process as you decide to leave.
Yeah. So this, I do feel like my experience in this is something that was very unique to my journey. I haven't met anyone that kind of had the same thing happen in the same scenario that I did. First, I think it's important to say I never thought about finding opportunities outside of Louisville. The NWSL was always my priority. It was always my focus. Fighting for that contract was my prerogative. That being said, I also had to start figuring out what's best for me. I think the other thing that I do, and not even legally, but like I have to say is I did not get cut from Louisville. It was not, the coaches did not come to me and say, yeah, we're done with you. It was my own decision to leave. And I do believe it was the best decision for me, but it was on my own prerogative. So around the like last week of February, I walked into training and it was known that two of the rookies had signed contracts, which is amazing for them. I'm so happy for both Raylan Turner and Emma Sears. Something that was at Louisville was you didn't have a number until you signed a contract. And so our numbers on all of our practice clothes, on all of our stuff. And I walked into training one day and I saw that both of them had numbers. And I was like, what does that mean for me? Because that was number 25 and 26. And so at this point, I'm like, I don't understand the position I'm in. And so I texted my agent, letting him know, I'm like, I believe these other two girls signed contracts. Like, I don't really know what that means for me. And so my agent ended up getting on the phone with the GM, and it ended up being this whole big thing about like, what is my current position on the roster? Are you, because like I said, there's still other ways that I could make a team. they can waive someone gets hurt. There's a bunch of different factors of like, it wasn't a no for me at that moment. It was a lot less likely, but it wasn't a no. And they stressed that to my agent. They're like, there is still a possibility, someone doesn't stay with their contract. There's a bunch of angles that could have been made. There's a lot of factors, I guess. So for me in this time, I was trying to figure out my best move. And also I flashed back to something that was said to me in November. And that was by Dave of, what do you want your rookie year to look like? And that's when a lot of decisions comes down to it. Like I said, I'm so grateful for my time in Louisville and understanding that I am good enough to compete in this level. And if there's one thing I got out of those 5 weeks there, it is that I am good enough to be there. And I feel confident in that. Do I have places to grow? Absolutely. 100%. I have plenty of areas to work on my game, but I held my own and I fought for a spot, and I thought, I'm proud of that performance and that ability to do that. And I know that I am at that level and I can get there. I also know that there's 26 spots. And in everyone's decision, that means a bunch of different things. And so when thinking about what I want my rookie year to look like, if I were to get that 26 spot, let's just say I got it, I also know I'm number 26 on that roster. What are the odds of me getting on the field? What are the odds of me making a travel roster? Would I fight for it? Absolutely. Would I give my everything? Absolutely. Do I think most development is going to happen on a field? Also, yes. Not that you're not going to develop in training. Of course you are. You're in different scenarios, but where I need to grow my game is getting used to this level and this different hybrid. And I was also realistic of that. So basically, all of this is going on about, okay, these girls have contracts. I don't. What does this mean for me? And in some crazy world, my agent gets a phone call from a team in Sweden. And they say, we're interested in Sam Carey. It literally happened the day that I found out about these contracts. And I can get more into how this happened because it's the most unbelievable thing in the world. And I was like, all right, let's get on a phone call. And sure enough, a day later, I get on a phone call with this team in Sweden. They play the Damallsvenskan, which is the top division in Sweden for pro soccer in, I would say, top 5 league in the world. They are, they had their first season in the Damallsvenskan because it's all promotion relegation last year, and they have a budget and they need a left-footed left back, and they found my film and they want me. Great, awesome. They're like, well, we want you on a plane soon. Well, Louisville is leaving tomorrow at 4 a.m. for Colombia, and I don't have a contract in my hand by this Swedish team. They say that they're interested in me, but I also don't fully know. So I'm now in this debate of, do I get in the plane to Colombia? Do I take a leap and just hope this contract comes through? What do I do? And this night was probably the most stressful night of my life, trying to make this decision. So I decided to go to Colombia because I'm like, I've committed to Louisville. This has always been my process. And I have no guarantee from the Swedish team, basically. So I can't take that leap. Go to Colombia. And I fully was convinced that by going to Colombia, I shut the door on Sweden because they're like, no, we don't want you to go to Colombia with another team. We want you to come to Sweden. So I was like, okay, close my door there. That's fine. We're going to stick this out. And I'm in Colombia and I get another phone call, and it's the contract has come through. The Swedish team really wants you. And they're looking at another left back who also has had many, many years in the NWSL. So with that, they need a decision soon because your choice won, but then that contract needs to go out to someone else if you say no. I'm like, well, okay, they're valuing me with someone over that has professional veteran experience. That's a great sign that they see something in me. They see that I can make an immediate impact and play. Okay. So basically all this comes to fruition. I have a sit down with the head coach and the GM of Louisville. And I'm like, let's be frank here. And we had a really, really honest, and I respect the conversation so much that they were willing to have it with me about, I need to think about what's best for me. And this has always been my prerogative, but if you don't see me in your future, that's totally fine. But I need to know. And basically the conversation comes down, and the next day I leave Colombia and I fly from Colombia to St. Louis, spend 12 hours in St. Louis packing my bags, and I am on a plane to Sweden the next day. And I arrived to Sweden and playing in IFK Norrköping On March 1st, I moved to Sweden.
So you've officially been in Sweden for almost a month now,
Yeah.
28 days.
Yeah, crazy.
You had a contract signed before you went to Sweden.
So I had the contract offer. Everything was on the contingency day one in Sweden that I passed medical exams. So yes, the based on my soccer, based on my football talent, everything was good to go. It was just as long as I passed the medical exam as soon as I got here, contract was going to be signed.
What does that conversation look like with your family and Trey and all of them then? I mean, this is a quick turnaround in your decision to your flight.
Yeah, it was absolute insanity. I don't like that period is like I said, like all my time in Louisville leading to this last week was the most unwell I have ever been. Um, to be honest though, like I think my family all agreed with the decision. I think they all emotionally with where I was at and how I was, they knew that I wasn't okay in Louisville. And I think it's crazy that it felt like the safer option to fly across the world, which is just insane to say. But for me in my life, the fact that I had a contract as soon as I landed was a really nice feeling. After fighting for my life for 2 months. And just to have a team that fully believed in me and saw me as a vision in here was amazing. And even like on the Zoom call, they're like, oh, like, would you want to live in a 1 bedroom or a 2 bedroom apartment? And I was like, well, I'm actually married and would love my husband to come. They're like, all right, 1 bedroom it is. Sounds great. We'll help you with his visa. Like everything has just been so amazing. And so I was like, it felt right. And just there's something, I don't know if I'm a religious person. I don't know if I'm a spiritual person. There's so much there. But there's one thing that just really made me make my decision. And it's so crazy. But the fact that they literally, I've asked them now, I'm like, how did you find my film? Like, how did this all even come up? Well, the coach here, I think like everyone outside of the America is very confused by the American university system and what that even means. However, the assistant coach is actually from the US. She played college soccer at UCF, moved to Sweden, started playing and just fell in love with Sweden and now coaches here. And the head coach was getting basically so inundated with emails from agents about players that in March or end of February, he just hands his phone to this American coach and was like, find me a good player. I don't really know, that she was scrolling and found my film that was sent to her by my agent in December. It
Wow.
literally was all like randomly, some random email in December that had my name and it got rediscovered. And they're like, yeah, we want her. Oh, that just so happened to be the same day that two people signed contracts. We get in town, I was really, this is a personal thing, but like when I got drafted to Louisville, I was really excited because my grandfather was always one of my biggest supporters. And one of our last big family vacations we took together was at Churchill Downs. And so I was like, oh, it's like back, grandpa's with you. So when I'm making this decision to go to Sweden, I'm like Googling because naturally I'm like, okay, how big of a town is it in Sweden? Am I like moving to like a small village? Is this like a city? Like what is going on? And so naturally you judge your towns by coffee shops. At least that's how I did. So I'm like, all right, coffee shops in Norrköping, Sweden. The first one that pops up is Wayne's Coffee. And my grandfather's name was Wayne. And I'm like, all right, this is my sign. Something grandpa's telling me to go. And that is honestly how we made our decision.
Wow. I mean, wow. Speechless a little bit. Like, what an incredible journey. And then for you to get here now, now you're in Sweden, you've been here for a month. They, gave you a 1 bedroom apartment so that your husband can come and join you. What does this look like? What does your first week here in Sweden look like? What does your life here look like? I mean, I'm sure it's very, very different.
Yeah, I joke all the time that like I kind of forget how absolutely insane it was to basically make a 15-hour decision to move to a country across the world that speaks a language that I don't speak. When it gets like put out like that, I'm like, oh yeah. Trey very humbly pointed out to me the other day that like I quite literally get paid to run around in circles and get yelled at in a language I don't understand. Also a very true statement. I joked my first week in Sweden, like no one can hold anything against me because I think I was like in the biggest days. Part of me was like, what the heck is happening? I don't know what my life is. I just moved across the country. I'm also jet lagged, like, and I also have my first sense of relief that I had in 2 months. I think immediately I was laughing more and smiling more and trying to figure out what this new life in Sweden is. I think the joke is that the soccer is the easiest part because it's soccer at the end of the day. Like, yes, a lot of the time I'm surrounded by Swedish and I don't really understand, but everyone in Sweden does speak English. So that's amazing. And the girls have been the best translators and honestly, some of the best friends I've already made. I love the team so, so much and the people I'm with every day. It's harder when so I think when I'm in soccer, because so much is in English and everything, I don't really realize it. And then I like go to the grocery store and listen. My first week in Sweden, I was like, why does my coffee taste so weird? I was using buttermilk without having any idea in my coffee. I did buy a pint of, I was like, oh yeah, I want some yogurt. Bought a pint of sour cream. Had no idea. That was a rude awakening. So I've had my stumbles. There's been plenty of it. I was really confused about why the ovens are so low here. And then I realized everything's in Celsius. Yeah, I've had my stumbles. But I think just I'm so much happier. I get to play a game that I love. We've had 3 games. I've started in all 3. I'm getting minutes. I want to say one thing that I think is really, really important to say. I had people quite literally text me when I left Louisville and signed in Sweden. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry it didn't work out. Moving overseas, playing overseas, in my experience, this is my message I want to deliver, is not a step down. I feel like in our system, it gets viewed like that. We get viewed, you didn't make it in the NWSL, everything else is worse. And guess what, guys? The US does not own soccer. Like, we are not a juggernaut that we think we are. Like, soccer has existed in the world for a long time. It's a lot of other ones, main priorities. Like, I feel like that is something that gets strained. I do not see a step down from this level. I do not see a difference between where I am at now and where I was in Louisville. And, maybe call me whatever, call me dumb, call me naive. I don't really care. As someone who is in it every day, who is in it in the trenches there and who is in it in the trenches here, it is not different. There's nuances that are different. There's styles of play that are different. Don't get me wrong. The level is a very, very high, elite, professional environment. I'm not the best here. I'm thankful I'm not. I didn't want to be. If I am, then I'm not getting pushed. If I think I'm the best, then why would I be here? I have to work for a starting spot every day. I'm lucky that I'm in a situation where they see me fit enough to be one. It did not just get given to me. I earning it every single day. I think that there is such this idea that like going overseas is like this letdown because the US is the best. Like, yes, the NWSL is very, very good. There's so many other great leagues in the world. And there's a lot of different perspectives. And that's one thing I am very excited to expand this podcast to the bigger life, because there's a big, big life outside of not only just Big Ten soccer, but also expanding outside the US. And I think hearing some perspectives on it, when I first heard some of these perspectives, my mind got blown. And I really am excited to bring that to this podcast, because genuinely, I think there is a big misunderstanding about what football across the world is.
Absolutely. I mean, for someone who has more than spoken enough on their ignorance going into the game of college and then much less professional, the only thing that really gets talked about as the next step is the NWSL draft. Everything else is like, not really. Maybe the USL for those top players, and that's about it. Last episode, we had talked about me briefly going over to England for winter break to train and play some USL games against them. And I think the biggest thing I learned there is because everyone on the team, and a really cool thing that they do is like they give their story. They sit down and you basically are like, here's what you should know about me and my journey, both soccer and personally. And it was such an amazing experience to get to hear, because it really did open my eyes to how big the world is, how big the soccer world is, how many options you have, and how high of a level you can compete at without being in the United States. And I had no idea that those were even options, because nobody talks about them.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it's so important. And it's something that I was ignorant to as well. When I first heard, I was like, do I want to go to Sweden? Like, it's not the NWSL. What do you mean? And like I said, like, this is nothing bad about the NWSL, but it is that the rest of the world is as good. And I think it's also like, I'm 23 years old. I am a newlywed with my husband living in a small town in Sweden in our own apartment. This is the first time as a married couple we get to live together. This is an amazing town that I love walking around every day. Like, we joke, I'm living my life as Ted Lasso right now. Like, there's a men's game. Literally, my apartment is like the window was there and the stadium is there. I have a 500 feet walk to work, if that. And the men's game is like sold out for every game we're going tomorrow. The women's game gets, you know, 20 or I think like 11,000 fans every game. Like it is big. I walk around, they're like, oh, you're the American on North Shipping. Like people know who I am when I walk around town. It's crazy. And so, yeah, I think there's just so much excitement in football around the world and just the way that I've learned it in the last month. And yeah, I just think that the way that we are trained to think is really naive in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. You had mentioned that you talked about your USL and deciding not to take that contract, and basically they put you on a deadline. Did you ever reach back out after, between Sweden and the NWSL, or was it pretty much just like, okay, I'm going to Sweden now?
No, it was very interesting. And a lot of it was there was a USL team in the option. It actually wasn't the same one that had offered me a contract, but there was a different USL team that was very much like, yeah, we're gonna offer a contract as as soon as Louisville makes their decision, like if it's a no, that we're offering her a contract. And that was definitely an option. It was when I seriously was considering. For me at this time, the reason why I chose to go to Sweden and not try the USL, I know many girls that, they didn't work out in the NWSL and they are looking at the USL, and that's where they're leaning. And I am really, really excited to see where that league goes. For me, I have made so much progress as a player in the last 2 months in Louisville, just, working myself from the ground up, being surrounded by so many elite players, a whole different style, that I am a better player than I've ever was at Iowa. And I can confidently say that in the last 6 weeks. And it was so exciting for me to see that momentum and see everything I gained, that the worst part about signing a USL contract for me would be that 4 months off. Because the USL kicks off in August. They're starting preseason in July. So like, what would I do from now to July? And I would have really struggled with that killing of my momentum, because I knew I was growing and I wanted to keep learning and I wanted to keep growing and I was on that high. And so it was nothing against the USL. It was, what would my next 4 months look like? And in Sweden, we start our season April 13th. I've played in preseason games. We basically are in preseason again. So for me, I've just been in preseason from January to now, and now it's game time. So it was a lot more of a seamless transition versus waiting for the USL to happen.
Yeah. What does the Sweden season look like? When's your kind of end date? What's the break? What is this?
Yeah. So my contract end date is in November. Europe typically is like an August to May calendar season, which is what the USL is also mimicking. It's pretty much everyone except a select few countries is on that schedule. Sweden is one of those select few. So we have not started the 2024 season yet. It's not a continuation of anything. So we kick off on April 13th, our first game. Typically, we'd actually start around now, but there's an international break next week. So we have girls that will be gone for national camp across the whole league. And so they didn't want to start season during that week. So we kick off against BK Hawken, who is just eliminated from the Champions League yesterday in the quarterfinals against PSG. So elite team, won the league last year. We kick off against them on April 13th will be our first game, and we'll play from April through November.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Look at you. You're just living out the biggest life
Just
in
having
Sweden.
having fun in Sweden. I get my Swedish summer. I've heard they're gorgeous. I can't wait. Learning a bit of Swedish here or there. I'm by no means fluent, but I got a couple words down, a couple sayings down, mostly soccer stuff, different things that work with, soccer and understanding there. We'll have a like summer break at the end of July. So, Trey and I are going to go on a little European vacation, explore Europe, do all these things. My family is visiting in June. His family is visiting in July. So we have so much to look forward to, as I live literally in Europe for the next 9 months.
That's amazing. What is, other than the level outside of the United States, what's the biggest takeaway from this journey and these crazy last few months you've gone through?
I think the biggest takeaway is that it's what Ellie Jean said to me on day one. Everyone's going to have their own journey. Everyone's going to have their own path, and it's putting on the blinders and focusing on you. I struggled with my first couple weeks here of, was it a failure? What did I do in the NWSL? Was it a failure? And really sitting with that and like, did I fail? And I can now confidently say like, no, I absolutely didn't. I gave it my all. I left everything in the field and I have zero regrets about what happened. I also think the best case scenario happened for me. I know that I'm good enough to compete at that NWSL level. I've made connections. I get to go get minutes my rookie year, play, build myself a resume to maybe one day come back if I want, if that's what I choose. I think that the biggest thing for me is that there is a bigger path and there's a journey for every single player if that's what you want. And it doesn't have to look like the mainstream. And I'm happy mine isn't.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the older I get, the closer to that deadline I kind of get as I watch my college career kind of wrap up here. You know, when I talk to these older girls, that's the biggest thing that I learn is that how unique every single journey has been. We've had all different types of players go throughout that process at Michigan State that I've gotten the privilege to learn from. Hearing your story, I mean, there's so much I learned in this podcast that I had no idea. You know, and I think it's a really powerful story to share because there is so much ignorance surrounding this process. It's not talked about enough, especially the in-depth in and outs of it. You kind of get the highlight reel.
Yeah.
Of if you get signed and if you make it, it's like a yay, and if not, you're like, oh. That's pretty much it. You see posts on Instagram. There's not a lot of content surrounding it to really know what goes on behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So outside of soccer now, you know, last kind of fun, quick question here. What's the best like food? The Swedish candy or Swedish, you know, I've seen you on your
Yes.
Snapchats like with the ice cream and you know, different things. What's the biggest difference in that?
Well, okay, so we are recording this on Easter weekend. So I've asked a bunch of girls, I'm like, what is Easter? Like Trey and I are gonna have a little mini Swedish Easter. So some girls on the team helped us out and cooked us some dinner the other day. And so Swedish meatballs with lingonberries, which is kind of like a cranberry sauce, and like just, you know, mashed potatoes, a bunch of stuff. So yeah, I think literally go to your local IKEA, get the meatball lunch. It's probably like the most accurate thing. Like we went to IKEA today, it was an adventure. But no, I think just the meatballs have been great. Swedish candy, I think that was a big thing on TikTok. 10 out of 10. Totally recommend. So yeah, no, it's been honestly amazing.
That's amazing, Sam. And I really thank you for sharing your story. I
Yeah.
cannot thank you enough for how
I
open you
think
were
it's,
with
yeah,
this.
I'm happy that it's finally coming out because I think there's a lot of perceptions and ideas of what may have happened, but I also think that this journey is it's so unique, but also it's not. I think it's real for so many people that have either been through it or know someone or whatever. And so I'm happy to finally kind of peel back the curtain on a lot of things that I had no idea are real a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I can't wait to follow you throughout this journey. I mean, there's so
Yes.
much more left to learn throughout this as you go through this process. You know, and I look forward to catching up with you every week as we go throughout season 2.
Yes. Stay tuned on The Bigger Life. I promise so many more episodes. We'll have more from our lovely guest Jordyn and our lovely co-host, hearing all about her life in college soccer, what the heck a spring season is, what does summer look like, the emotions of going into a fifth or a last season as someone that I just did. I'll hold that against her as much as she did against me last year. You know, I think there's so much to look forward to as we kind of expand our horizon a little bit from college soccer, looking more about professional soccer, days in the lives, you know, comparing college to pro, the unique situation that Jordyn's in college and how that compares to a pro, and expanding our horizons a bit as a podcast. You know, stay tuned and stay ready with us as we kind of journey these things. Follow us both on social media as we tell our stories, so much more. And we're so, so grateful for you guys. Sorry for this really, really long episode, but we feel like it's important to air out everything that's happened in my life a bit. And we're so thankful for all y'all.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's anything else you guys want to hear in season 2, any questions you have, as always, let us know either on the Girls Soccer Network Instagram and social media accounts or our personal ones. And yeah, tune in every Thursday, season 2.
We'll be there season 2. All right, guys, soccer on.
Bye, guys.